absence of the father in America is so big. As men, we need to take the reins on that and conduct ourselves in a manner, more morally right, and have responsibility for what we do.
Society is so carnal. We live in such a carnal society, like sex sells. And so where do we get back to those human principles of there is identity and purpose to who I am and what I'm doing with you. And we're getting this is a part of my story now. And this is a part of your story now. And now I'm part of your future, this could mean, and you're part of my future. There are all these grand ideas that we've just put to the side because we're a culture that prioritizes sex. Welcome to Set the Table, a show where we bring together everyday people from opposite sides of the cultural and political aisle for kind conversations about tough topics. I'm your host, Peace Ike. In a world where shouting matches have replaced dialogue, we're creating something different, something human. For the past several years, I've been gathering complete strangers around dinner tables to talk about race, religion, politics, you name it. Now we're bringing those conversations to you, alongside insights from thought leaders and curious minds who are making sense of our divided world and showing us a better way to engage it. So pull up a chair. There's room for you at the table. Welcome back to the Set the Table podcast. And in today's episode, we are continuing our Table Exchange series, which is a series where we bring two thoughtful guests together, often from opposite sides of the cultural or political divide, to the table for a real human conversation. And today you're about to hear from Alan, who is a 39-year-old IT admin, and Dave, who is a 67-year-old retired IT engineer. Neither of these gentlemen knew they were in the same field until they just met a few moments ago. But they come from two very different generations, two very different worldviews, and they are here to listen and to speak honestly, not to debate, but to dialogue. So let's get into it. Alan, it is really good to have you with us today.
Very good to be here. Thank you, Peace, and appreciate this format.
Awesome. And Dave, I'm so grateful that you've joined us today.
Thank you, Peace. It's wonderful.
So I'm realizing that I think my favorite part about doing these podcasts is the chit chat that we get to have off the air before we start recording, where we're just kind of getting to know each other, because that's the part that guests don't get to hear, which is that things are just as organic and laid back and civil off the air as they are on the air. And it's not like we're putting on our best behavior as soon as I press record,
Indeed, yes.
Yeah,
that's true.
Alan, I'm going to start with you. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, maybe what keeps you busy, where you're from, and anything else you'd like us to know.
Sure. My name's Alan. I live just about 30 minutes east of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a little town called Murraysville. I'm currently an IT administrator. Have been for almost 15 years now. Since I graduated, I graduated from Liberty University in Virginia. Got my bachelor's in information systems management in 2010. And I've been doing IT professionally ever since then. I've always been interested in technology and computers and things like that, so that's always been an interest for me. I am currently married. I have been married for going on 10 years now. It'll be 10 years in October, October 3rd. If I didn't remember that, my wife would be upset. So October 3rd, be 10 years. I've been married, and we have a 7-year-old daughter. So I've been very blessed that way.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure your daughter keeps you very busy. That's a fun age.
Yeah, it is.
And so you should know, Alan and I went to high school together.
We did, yes.
Yes. And I said on last week's episode that the really interesting thing is that the people who've been reaching out to be on this podcast are people from my past. And it's been really fun to kind of reconnect and, get to know them a little bit better. So that was back in, I think we graduated in '03. Am I right?
You graduated 2003. I did 2005. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot I was older than you. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew that, but I didn't realize I was 2 grades above you. So,
Yeah. Two Grace.
okay, awesome, awesome. And I'll add to that, I saw you within the last maybe 7 or so years because you've come to one or two of the concerts that me and my sister used to perform at.
Yes. Yes. Both in Pittsburgh and then somewhere out of Pittsburgh, and then the recent one was in Aliquippa, somewhere at a coffee house up there.
I remember that. Okay, well, so glad to have you. Welcome, welcome. Dave, let's meet you. Tell our
Thank
listeners a
you.
little bit about you and anything you'd like us to know.
Sure. I'm a 67-year-old retired IT engineer. I grew up in State College, Pennsylvania, not too far from where you guys went to high school, I guess. Um, I have been married for 43 years. We've got 3 kids, one about 40, one about 30, and one about 20, 27. We have 2 grandchildren with our oldest child and his wife. Um, we raised our family in Brooklyn, where I met my wife, and then also in New Jersey, where we moved to find better, affordable schools. And when our kids left home, they all came to California. So we now live in California.
Nice.
Um, we're in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been retired for about 9 years. And currently, I like to do anything I can outdoors and stuff with my family as well. So that's pretty much who I am.
This is
Awesome.
kind of a tangent question, but I just felt the unction to ask. Dave, you've been married 43 years. Alan's been married 10 years. What's your one piece of advice to him for a fulfilling, happy marriage and family life?
Oh, wow. Read a lot about communication and um, trauma.
Hmm.
You know what, Dave? That is really good advice. That a lot of people who have asked for wisdom for marriage advice have just said communication, communication. I mean, it's got to be, it's one of those things that you think you're good at, but when you're trying to do it with a spouse, you it just fail. And I'll say, at the beginning of my marriage, I thought I was communicating fine with my wife, and then I found out I really wasn't. There were just things that I wasn't doing that to her was like she didn't know what was going on. I thought I had to communicate to her. So there's different levels of communication that you develop by having a spouse, and that's just I think an ongoing thing that you never can perfect, but you always want to get better at it. I think.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. I didn't learn a whole lot about communication until a few years ago. So somehow we got through almost 40 years without it.
See, that's what you call a miracle.
It helps to
Man.
have common goals. So
Yes,
There
yes,
you go.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's
yeah.
a great segue into the very next question that I was going to ask. And since you were the one to say it, Dave, I'm going to ask it to you first, which is if you had to sum up the values that most drive your worldview, what would they be?
Wow. Um, Certainly, probably the first one is family, um, and maybe compassion. Um, and I think values. Wow, those are the two main values. They have, people are so different that those can take on so many different characteristics depending on whether you're talking about one family member or another, or one friend or another. Um, my wife and I both value education very strongly. Um, and I think that probably informs most of our decisions. Education and hard work, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I love those first two, because I really do believe that the family is the foundation of really almost everything else. And you mentioned trauma at the very beginning of this talk, and we are all humans navigating the traumas that we incurred as children and seeking out healing as we age and as we mature. And so, family is the foundation of growing and raising healthy adults. So,
Yeah.
family
No,
and compassion, you really summed it up in those two. I can't think of two better ones. So,
thanks.
Alan, how about you?
So I would say my worldview really, I guess, start with Christianity. I would want to say being Christian and to be more Christ-like every day. I recognizing that I fail at it miserably every day, but always striving to be better, be grow. Even like we were saying earlier with communication, it's just a growing thing that you do with your spouse that every day that you try to be better at it. Um, you know, I look at things that um, you know that I've I've learned over the years and learned in church and Sunday school and learn out in the world and learn how people interact with one another, and I've put that through the filter of my relationship with Jesus Christ and what that how that drives my worldview, how I interact with people. And I think one of the big things is not only to project in words what you aspire to be or what you want the world to be, but to show Christ's love in a practical way with other people. For me, that's big. I mean, to help people to just randomly help a stranger on the street or something like that. Um, I think can have a big impact on people. So that's kind of how I uh, view myself, and as a worldview that you know how I strive to be.
Hmm. That kind of circles us right back to compassion as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, it seems like you gentlemen are really highlighting what keeps us connected. So I'm going to segue into a little bit more of a political topic here. And, sometimes or so often our values are what constitute our political choices. And it can be really hard to come to kind of juxtapose the things that you value with, a level of self-preservation. And I think when I talk to people about political topics, there's this war of, well, these are the things I want to do. This is what I value in society, but these are the things that are practical and they don't always line up, da 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 da. So with all of that said, Alan, I'll stick with you for a moment. I want to ask you, do you feel like your political choices reflect your values? And if so, how?
Yes, I do. As I said at the beginning of the show, I would describe myself as a constitutional conservative, and I think that you know, being conservative aligns with my view of Christianity. Being a law-abiding citizen, having laws and things like that, following laws. Now there are certain aspects of the laws and certain aspects that will, in my view, go against God's will. But and how do you go about dividing that between what man's law is, what God's law is? And so you have to filter that, if you will, through your knowledge and worldview and what others say, and uh, so I do think that, and I don't think one candidate that I've voted for in the past has hit 100% of my check boxes for everything that I wanted. I've always voted for the person that more or less reflects what I believe, what I want to see. Um, and That's kind of how I square and think about my worldview, how my worldview influences my outlook and my political choices.
Yeah, okay. This would be a really good time for us to clarify for the listeners, as a constitutional conservative, who you voted for. I'm sure it's quite obvious, but go ahead and share with us.
Oh, sure. Both 2016, 2020, and 2024, Donald J. Trump.
Okay. All right. We're going to come back to that in a moment, but I want to give Dave an opportunity to either respond directly to that or answer the same question about values and voting.
So I guess I also feel that my voting is very related to my values. Um, I come from, I'm going to call them a religiously democratic family because I think a lot of times people treat their party affiliation almost the same way they treat their religion. It's like you kind of toe the line with your family or else, and
I'd agree with that, Dave. Yeah.
Yes.
so anyway, that's my background, and certainly uh, there are a lot of values that I see in the democratic legislation that I think align with both family values and compassion. Um, that being said, I certainly don't agree with everything the Democrats do or everything the Republicans do. I pick and choose, and I often feel that our politicians are so old and so isolated that I really don't have a good choice when I go to vote at the presidential level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked 2 episodes ago about this idea of what's called the exhausted majority. And there was a very large study done, one of the largest studies done on polarization. And that study revealed that the percentage of Americans that are considered highly devoted to their party is very low. But the majority is what they call the exhausted majority. They're not happy with their choices, they're disillusioned, they are feeling stuck, and then they have to go one way or the other. And then
Yeah,
what happens? Well, then um, we become emotionally polarized against that person who really had to make a decision that they weren't even happy making. And then
exactly.
what does that do? You're fostering the hatred that wasn't even there in the first place. So in a
Right.
way, we are really psychologically abusing one another. Meanwhile, we've been pushed to the extreme, and that wasn't our decision to make in the first place.
I agree.
And I think too it comes down to too, not having like a viable third party, like a third party being in the last time there was a legitimate third party candidate was 1992 with Ross Perot, that won the majority of the plurality of the vote. He didn't. I don't think he won a state, but I think he got something like 18 or 19% of the national vote, which was pretty huge. And then you have things like the Democratic primary process, where in 2016 where it was Hillary versus Bernie. And it was almost like the Democrats pushed out Bernie to to favor Hillary, and it kind of felt like they uh, fix it. Not to say the Republicans don't either, but um, that was one aspect that I thought Bernie had a real shot at winning. And according to if I remember the delegate count, he actually did has a significant amount of delegates in 2016. So I think the lack of a third option is what can make people angry too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think after Ross Perot, they said, well, we're not letting that happen again. That was a little too close.
Yeah.
Yeah, that slogan, my voice, my vote. Not really. Your voice, our vote. We tell you who you get to choose. So,
Yeah, it's what it seems like.
Yeah, I don't feel that, I don't know, the Democratic Party power structure is very frustrating to me. I don't understand how people who are so out of touch with most people in the country even get to an opportunity to run. It seems like that seniority is the only thing that's important.
Mm-hmm. And money, of course. Who can afford campaigning is ridiculous. You can't afford to campaign. You have to raise money, all these donors, who can afford that, you know?
Yeah, certainly that's part of it, but I don't understand why only the oldest people are able to raise money. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Biden was Biden had no business being president, in my opinion. He just
Wow.
was too old. He was
Yeah.
not mentally there.
I totally agree with you, Dave. There, yeah, and both points actually were, uh, I don't think it's right that this last election. I think the Democrats spent close to 2 billion on their campaign, and I think Trump spent over 1 billion. So that it's like the ridiculous amount of money that's being thrown into elections. Um,
Hmm. Well, let's talk about Trump there because now we're there. My question number one is before we get to the frustrations, um, I asked this to the last guest that I had on Table Exchange, and it was, I think, a really great way to open up more of the emotional experience of being an American. So I'm going to ask it to you, which is, how did your experience in the last 4 years end up influencing your vote for Trump?
Well, I'll begin with, I mean, one of the premise of what Dave just said. I think Biden really had no business being president. I mean, he proved that definitely the last 2 years. But I mean, the 4 years that he was president, I don't believe he did a good job. And especially the last 2 years, cognitively, it just seems like he wasn't there. And of course, we had um, the COVID, of course, 2020. So that really influenced, I think, the national politics to uh, get out more of the people voting versus not voting. But in 2020, it almost seemed like Joe Biden, ran a ghost campaign or basement campaign, if you will, where he really wasn't there. He didn't present any uh, good ideas or anything like that. He was just like, just the Democratic Party structure will carry him through. And that was kind of my frustration with that, and what we talked about earlier, the power structure of the two parties, kind of just telling you who you should vote for rather than you actually having a voice. But the frustration with Biden in particular was, all the transgender movement, not being able to define what a woman is, abortion, illegal immigration. My goodness, I mean, you'd have over the past 4 years, almost, I think it's 15 million immigrants in this country. And that's a big thing. And I'm a person that's for immigration, but for legal immigration. Just shouldn't be a giant free for all. And the spending that Biden did, how much money he spent. I mean, I think it was like close to 11 trillion over his 4 years. I realize that money year after year grows due to inflation, but I mean that just an astronomical amount of money to pile on the national debt, just keep growing bigger and bigger. And I think last would be the abysmal military withdrawal from Afghanistan, that happened, that claimed the lives of U.S. Marines over there. I think it could have been done much better in a more orderly fashion. So that wasn't a good look at all. Those are things that really kind of influenced my vote for Trump.
Okay. Dave, I want to give you a ton of time to respond.
I'm sorry, I was rambling. Sorry.
No, no, you didn't ramble. In fact, you made very connected points. I listed all of them. There was five of them. So I'm going to actually repeat those five, and then I'll give the table to Dave to respond. And I really want to share how you've experienced the last 4 years, Dave. But the first thing that Ellen mentioned was transgenderism, which is a very polarizing topic in general, and so is abortion. And then you also mentioned immigration, spending, and Afghanistan. Dave, take that wherever you want and just share your heart a little bit.
Sure. So I guess I guess the thing that soured me on voting for Trump, even though I was clearly very frustrated with the Democratic candidates, the thing that really soured me on it was the misogyny and the racism that Trump is constantly using to drum up support and to polarize people. I don't see that coming from the Democratic candidates, although Hillary's comment about the deplorables wasn't very helpful. So, and certainly, the Democrats have their share of prejudice as well. But I just find that in this country, with so many different kinds of people and such a wide disparity between the rich and the poor, and between people who are legal and illegal, that the idea of inclusion that the Democrats are trying to promote, maybe not successfully, but that idea has a lot of appeal to me. I do. I do think the immigration problem is um, very important. I don't understand why a country that needs millions of immigrants doesn't make it legal for them to come here. Almost everybody I met who's an immigrant is working hard and doing things and working always for people who are citizens, who are very happy to have them as their employees. So, or as providing services that they use. It's very clear to me that we have a labor shortage here. So I don't understand why we don't legally open the gates for citizenship instead of, I don't know what we're doing now, but right now it looks like we have essentially stopped immigration from what I've read recently. Um, the current politics has stopped the flow of immigrants across the border dramatically. Now, I don't know what the long-term effect will be, but I imagine we'll find out. As far as things like healthcare, I thought the Affordable Care Act was wonderful. In fact, things are so polarized that, when my my wife would talk to her friends whose children were using the Affordable Care Act to continue on their parents' insurance until they were 26. And they would say, "Oh, Obama never did anything for us." And my wife would say, "But isn't your daughter receiving insurance now for an extra 2 years?" And they would go, Obama didn't do that. That wasn't him." So I just find that there's so little honesty in the media about what good each side actually does and also what bad each side does. And I find there's so much polarization. If you listen to Fox News or NBC, you think the world is two completely different places. And, um, I think that both Biden and Obama deported more people per year than ever in history. They didn't stop the people coming in, but they did deport tons and tons of people. Um, I guess the thing that frustrates me about politics right now is that during the election, people knew about Project 2025, but I think that Trump sort of distanced himself from it. And now that he's been in office, you can see that he is implementing almost everything in Project 2025. And that is a very scary process. I think we're going through probably one of the riskiest times in American history right now. Um, I don't know what's going to happen, but Although, the on the surface, certainly hope he's successful in bringing about peace in the areas of the world that don't have peace right now. And I do respect him greatly for trying to do that. Um, if he brings that about, I'll be very happy. However, I think on the economic side, I don't know. It's hard to tell the future, but based on my experience in industry over the years, I think he's kicked off one of the most serious depressions that we'll have. I don't think that the economy has any chance of a soft landing, even if he negotiates tariff deals with everybody. I think he's already changed the psychology of the business environment into such a negative viewpoint that next year's budgets are going to be slashed. People are going to be laying off. Um, and I don't think it's just in the US. I think it's all around the world. I think the uncertainty that he has added to the global environment is going to suppress business activity significantly. And I think we're all going to see the impact 6 months to a year from now.
Hmm. Yeah, Alan, I'm curious to know what you have to say about the tariffs war, which seems to be going back and forth. We're not quite sure where it is. It changes from day to day, week to week. But what do you feel like the long game is, and do you see the long game and the benefits of what Trump is trying to do, or do you think it's not going as well as he had hoped it would go?
So I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty as Trump is putting tariffs on on nations, um, and I'll circle back to that. But well, I just want to put out there, let's not forget um, that the economy wasn't all sunshine and rainbows under Biden. Um, there was significant inflation that happened, and you can say that happened because of COVID. Well, okay, let's go a year or two after COVID, and and inflation was still rampant. Yeah, the stock market was on a upward trajectory, but that's because the government was injecting artificial money into the supply, um, and driving up the stock market, which was good for stockbrokers and things like that. But I think for the average American who was trying to afford groceries and gas and necessities like that, it was hard. I know it was hard on me and my family. Um, but yeah, the tariff deals. I think there's a strategy here that Trump is trying to get countries to stop taking advantage of the United States, where they have for years and years and years. Where they impose tariffs on our products, but we don't want to impose tariffs on theirs. He wants to change the global economic structure to where countries are fairly trading with one another. I mean, he wants to get to a point where I think we actually have free trade, as opposed to one country imposing tariffs on another country not. And I think that his goal is to create wealth for Americans because of the products and services they produce, and not have countries like China that are massively undercutting the United States and stealing our intellectual property at a massive rate like they do. They manipulate their currency. I'm sure other countries do too, but China's one of the biggest offenders of doing that. So whether it's going good or not, I think right now we're still in a holding pattern. I think ultimately in Trump's dreams that after the first week or two, countries would be like, oh, okay, yeah, we get it. We'll come to the table and we'll negotiate. But you know you're dealing with countries that been doing things so a certain way for so long that I think it's going to take time for them to come to the table and actually work through a free trade agreement that will actually benefit them as well as benefit the United States. So we'll see what happens. The old saying, time will tell.
Yeah. when it comes to this tariff um, conversation, what do we do as a nation, right? Do we maintain the status quo for the sake of stability if there is an unfair advantage that has existed for years and decades? Or do we take a risk and try to, as they say, even out the playing field, despite the fact that the team we're playing with is not going to play nicely back with us? My personality is always like, it's got to be fair. But I see that it's creating a state of instability. So I understand a lot of the sentiments that you shared, Dave. Do you have any more comments based on what Alan just said?
I guess uh, I guess it's really clear that other countries in the world have that are basically producing the goods that we like to buy for low prices. They can do that because their workers make such a small wage compared to our workers.
Mm,
And we actually are huge beneficiaries of this unfair trade arrangement um, because we have so much stuff. I mean, the products literally just flow into this country and we use them and then they go to the trash bin and they end up in the landfill. I mean, the amount of clothes we go through every year is
mm,
phenomenal.
mm,
That's one aspect why I will agree with you, Dave, that I think Americans overall are really, really wasteful in what they throw away, what they just wasteful in money, wasteful in spending. That's one thing that I agree with you. Where
hmm I mean,
I've
truthfully,
Go ahead.
if the practice of going on Temu and buying clothes and jewelry that you don't need slows down, that's probably going to be a good thing for the health of our nation.
Yeah, I think just this week they closed the Temu loophole that I didn't realize there was a loophole that made it work, but apparently there was a law that said if you are shipping less than $800 worth of goods, your goods are free of all duties and taxes.
Wow.
So Temu was using that loophole basically to ship goods in that larger companies had to pay duties and taxes on.
hmm
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So that just closed, and that's going to change the Temu situation dramatically.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
So there,
Yeah.
so there were things that are, I would say, unfair that had nothing to do with NAFTA. They just kind of snuck under the radar probably because some tech company wanted to be able to do lots of small shipments with their new online platforms, which is
Hmm.
something they can do, right? Because in the past you couldn't take tons and thousands of small orders from individuals and consolidate them and make money on it. But today you can with the internet.
Yes, you can.
yeah. Now, it's in the past 20 years. I mean, Dave, you were saying. I mean, the internet boom really has come out, and they're able to connect directly suppliers and resellers and smaller resellers that didn't have a foothold to their end customer through the internet. Now, I think that's a huge e-commerce that the world can do, but that's one of the loopholes, as he said, that Temu and places like Shein and things like that, they were taking advantage of that loophole.
I've traveled a lot in other countries. Since I retired, pretty much, I spent a lot of time traveling. And, every country I've been to, the people have been wonderful. And they have very different opinions about the US and about our elections and about our presidents. Sometimes they love them and sometimes they hate them. But I have to say, I can't fault the people in the other countries. They're not, as individuals, they're not evil. They're not against the US. Most of them
Mhm.
love the US.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that, it's the things like NAFTA and the trade agreements that are maintained by the governments when they negotiate with each other. And honestly, all those agreements are the result of corporate lobbying. It's not like somebody asked you and I, the common people, whether we wanted to outsource all of our factory jobs overseas. That was not
Mhm.
the question that we were
Yeah.
asked.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, and when you travel around the US, the rural areas of the US are starting to look much more impoverished than they did when I was a kid.
Mm.
And um, it reminds the US is starting to look more like a third world country, in my opinion, with
Hmm.
the huge separation between the cities and the rural areas.
Hmm. And it's happening in terms of the urban areas and the suburban areas. That disparity is also getting larger and larger.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah. It seems as if the middle class is slowly disappearing. During COVID, the mom and pop shops and the small business owners really suffered the most economically, and the wealthy got very rich because Amazon was still pumping out and Walmart was still pumping out and all those things. And I just feel like we haven't quite recovered from that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether what Trump is doing brings jobs back to America.
Yeah, I really hope it does. Yeah, 'cause, I mean, it'd be awesome if other countries and companies would build factories here and make the product here and employ Americans, and that'd be great.
Yeah.
However, I'm
I
not
want,
sure the Americans really want to work in those factory jobs.
we'll find out.
And I think too, one of the incentives we talked about the COVID era, uh, I think too what had happened with a lot of the employment people. So COVID happened, and a lot of people worked from home, or they took time off work because their employer couldn't work, and the government subsidized that by giving extended unemployment and all this COVID unemployment stuff. And a lot of that incentivized people not to work, not to go back to work because the wages they were getting from the government were so high. Um, in some instances, the government was giving almost double what people were making, working. So, it's like they'd be stupid to go back to work and not get unemployment. Um, so I think some of that mentality, thankfully, I think some of it has gone away, but I think a lot of people still have that kind of mentality where they don't want to work or don't appreciate want to work. And I really hope that people, do want to come back and earn a wage, earn a good wage, do a good job, love what they do, and and produce a good product or service. So I think there is something to be said for having a purpose every day, having a purpose to do to make yourself or someone else's life better. And I think that goes a long way to improving someone's mental health, to be able to get up and go do something or strive towards something every day.
I definitely think we're a nation that is struggling from a scarcity of purpose and low morale. And when you have a people that are so demoralized from various issues, and for each side, that thing that's potentially contributing to those feelings of demoralization are different for each side. But when you have a country where everyone's demoralized and unmotivated, it's it's the perfect storm for increased tensions, anger, and resentment towards the other, because you're looking at your life and you're seeing that there's things that aren't you're not happy about, you're not satisfied. And when you're in that state, it's like, well, who is responsible for making my life so miserable? Oftentimes, rarely do we look inward in those times and see, okay, where do I need to reorient? Where's my heart check? It's so much easier to look at outside circumstances to see what is contributing to our lives not going as we'd like them to go. I feel like we kind of maybe got stuck in a little bit of that post-COVID, and that led to this, increased, um, you know, fire fighting fire, both sides, just daily, consistently fighting each other. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to kind of shift because you did mention two things and we kind of glossed over them, Alan, earlier. And I'm really curious to know, Dave, how you navigate some of these issues of morality, right? Um, Politics and morality. A lot of people say the two shouldn't be mixed. And so I don't
Why
know
is
if
that?
that's, well, a lot of people say that, oh, it's church and state. We got to keep them separate, and that's maybe
Oh, I
some,
see.
yeah, that's maybe a
I see.
definition. One person's definition of moral issues is different from another person's definition of moral issues. But Alan spoke to two things that for him were important when he cast his vote, which were transgenderism and abortion. And we didn't go in detail on those, but Alan, I'm assuming what you were alluding to was that I guess the hottest topic was more so the sports issue, right? Men and women's
Yeah.
sports. And that's kind of what you were alluding to there.
Yeah. Just number one, the talking point or the viewpoint that they won't or can't define what a woman is. The famous quote of Judge Ketanji Brown being questioned for her Supreme Court position, saying, "Well, I'm not a biologist. I don't know what a woman is." Like, that was kind of strange to me, and yeah, it just having men compete against women in sports and taking away the women's right to achieve anything in sports is number one. It's demoralizing to the women, and two, it's really unfair to have men compete with women when, in large part, men are they're generally bigger and stronger than women are. Not to say that all women are not big and strong, but I'd say as a majority that most men are better at physical activity and strength related exercises than men. And that's not any way, to say, oh, this conservative is saying that men are superior to women. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it's unfair to pit men against women who are biologically men, and it's my belief that there are only two sexes. There's a man and a woman. There's an XX and an XY chromosome. Now you have variations there uh, for people like autism, right? Autism is an extra chromosome thrown in there, but it still defines it's a woman with autism or a man with autism. There's no middle ground that you can be. Um, so that's part of my frustration with that argument.
Well, yeah, Dave, do you feel like this should have been a deciding factor for voters? Do you feel like it was thrown out of proportion or that it was a real frustration? Was it a talking point? What do you think?
Well, actually, I think gender is an interesting problem because we do segregate by gender. So we have men's rooms and women's rooms. We have men's sports and women's sports. So anytime you blur the distinction between men and women, you're going to run up against all kinds of issues because of the expectations of society. Like Alan mentioned, if you're on a women's team and a transgender person comes in who's built and shaped like a man and now playing, on a women's team, that's clearly a different playing field. It changes things. So now what do the women's teams have to do? They have to go out and recruit extra large transgender athletes to stay competitive. Is that
Mm.
how you want to do it? I don't know the answer to that, but it definitely changes the game and it causes issues. Um, to Alan's point about there being men and women, I've read a lot and studied a lot of biology. And Alan, if you ever get a chance to do that, you'll find out that there is a very small portion of the population that is not clearly one gender or another. Um, the X and the Y chromosome have a lot of uh, characteristics that control the expression of gender, and there are changes in both the X and the Y chromosome that can cause a person to have the mind of a woman and the body of a man, and vice versa. Yeah, I've worked in refugee camps, and I have worked with a number of people, and I said, why are you transgender? Why are you doing this? And the answer is, I have the mind of a woman and the body of a man, or vice versa. And so they've done a lot of biological research, and there are people who are what you call a chimera. They're a mixture of the sexes. Um, on the other hand, I think today, because the environment is so supportive, um, and because society is so segregated by sex, people are realizing they can take advantage of the rules to get an advantage for themselves. And I think that's unfortunate. And I don't think it's an easy thing to solve. I had a discussion with one friend whose daughter is, I'm not sure how you would say it, but she feels that she's not one sex versus another, but maybe some of both. And they were saying that something like, "Oh, you shouldn't even have the question of what sex you are on the page." And I said, "That's not going to solve anything. If you want to solve something, just build restrooms that have a common wash area and private stalls." And which is what they do in Europe. And they don't have the same kind of locker room issues in Europe, in some countries in Europe, that we do. And the reason we have the issue is just the way our bathrooms are built and the way we expect um, men to look a certain way and women to look another way, even though we don't all fit those rigid criteria.
Mm-hmm. I think that what you just explained, Dave, is a very fair response on the issue. Yes, anomalies exist, but the question is, do we change society to accommodate the minority at the expense of the majority? And those things that need to be taken into account are privacy, safety, opportunity, and all of those things. And, society, we're really bad at finding balance. We are a swinging pendulum. We swing from one extreme to the other extreme. This is just America. We can't figure out practical ways to respond to issues. And when leaders can't find practical and fair solutions to these very high stakes issues that affect the majority of the nation, you end up building a silent, frustrated majority. And I think that's what we saw happen in this last recent election.
About abortion, you asked about that, and I come from a family that supported abortion and a woman's right to choose. Um, I think when I was a young child, there was uh, a very strong feeling that before a certain number of weeks that life hadn't really started yet in some form of in some way of defining life. It wasn't viable yet. I think today that's very different. I think people now really do see life starting at the very beginning. And I think it's a very valid question. How do you handle the idea of abortion in today's world? And I guess when it's a choice between the mother's life and the baby's life, or maybe losing both, I think having a rule that makes it strictly illegal to perform an abortion is not productive. I think it's actually counterproductive. And I think that there are so many situations where a woman doesn't feel she has the desire or ability to keep a child to term, that she will go to incredibly dangerous lengths to obtain an abortion. and put herself at risk, and other people at risk. And so I think that if if you're going to outlaw abortion, you have to provide enough support for women who don't want children to carry them to term and to allow them to be raised by somebody else without um, all of the problems today that society creates for people who are not ready to have children.
Mm-hmm.
And that'd be the ideal outcome, I think, in that situation, Dave. For you know, I believe that every life is precious, and if women do have babies that they don't want for whatever reason, my dream would be to have them come to full term and put them up for adoption or in a godparent home or in a foster home or something like that, because there's tons of people that would want to adopt, want to have a baby. There my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, she had pregnancy troubles, and she couldn't have children, and she ended up adopting two beautiful three beautiful children. And there's tons of people like that couldn't get pregnant for whatever reason. But there's such a need and a want for children in the world, and children are so precious, that just abortion to me, it is not the right answer. And I think a lot of the onus on this subject has to do with women, right? But we forget that the male aspect, the men that actually are involved in this process, um, are too. And you know, as men, we have a responsibility to either not engage in intercourse in the women, because we are part of that process of being the father to that child. And so there's got to be a personal responsibility aspect of someone that um, takes responsibility for a child if a life is made. So, I mean, I don't know the practical aspect of it, but if men were held to be responsible for having a child with a woman, I think a lot of that would change in society. That men have to be responsible for their actions. They just can't, uh, the colloquial.
That's a very ideal view of men's behavior.
It's not realistic. It's not realistic.
Right, right.
But I mean, I'm just saying, men have to be responsible.
They should be. Unfortunately, both men and women, you know, Mother Nature doesn't really care uh, much about how the baby comes into being. Mother Nature just wants more babies because
Mm-hmm.
if there weren't babies, you and I and peace wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
here.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the
Well,
one fundamental fact of biology is that babies are what make it work.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Yeah. I think, yeah, so many of our issues come down to political solutions because we're not addressing root causes. And, when it comes to abortion, if I have my percentages correct, and I think I do, about 1% are due to rape and incest, and about it was 2.5% in the 80s that was life of the mother. Now it's down to 1% of abortions. And of course, there's going to be reporting errors there. Not everyone's coming forward with these, but it's a very low number. And so you have this other 98% that is not related to any of these extreme issues, but we never talk about that 98%. And so when I look at some of the biggest issues ailing our culture, I think about where have we lost, like I'll call it sanctity in how we conduct ourselves, to have an awareness that what I'm about to engage in is serious and has serious, and could potentially have serious repercussions if I'm not ready. But
Sure.
society is so carnal. We live in such a carnal society, like sex sells and free your body and free love. We don't instill the principles that matter. These are like human principles of like, you know, there's identity and purpose to who I am and what I'm doing with you. And we're getting this, this is a part of my story now. And this is a part of your story now. And now I'm part of your future. This could mean, and you're part of my future. Like there are all these grand ideas that we've just put to the side because we're a culture that prioritizes sex. And so where do we get back to that? There's a place to talk about that, but now when we talk about abortion, it's always just those two very serious things, rape and the life of the mother. Yes, we can't really do
So
much about
how do they break down the reasons for abortion aside from that 1 or 2%? What is the
maybe hardship, inconvenience, maybe financial
or not being
difficulties,
married or
not being
something
married,
like
unable, wanting to further your profession
yeah,
or your education, like life choices,
still being in school, that kind of thing.
those kind of things.
Just yeah.
Yeah. I do think that there's a level of cultural conviction that we lack. That I wish we could find a way to kind of get that responsibility and reverence back into how we conduct our bodies in society.
Well, it is, and I think back what I said, we need to, as men, we need to take the reins on that and conduct ourselves in a manner, more morally right. And have responsibility for what we do, because it just there's rampant. If you look at the average uh, problem in the, I would say, the American family. Um, there's a huge percentage of the American family that is without a father, right? It's either one parent, one parent, one mother, one father, and the absence of the father in what's called a nuclear or a nucleus home, in America is so big. It's so big, and I think children that grow up with one parent are far more likely to, not succeed in life, as opposed to a two-parent home. They don't get the upbringing that they should. They don't get the motherly love or the fatherly, stern influence or whatever they get from mother and father that a common two-parent household gets. And I think that's one aspect of the American life, and it's around the world too. But I mean, that a big issue is, not having two parents in a family. And I think there's a lot to be said for having both a stable mother and a stable father in a family, that can contribute to a child's upbringing.
Yeah, yeah. I can say
Very true.
this is the one thing that's really rampaging the Black community is fatherlessness, and it's linked to incarceration rates, juvenile delinquency, behavioral disorders, youth suicide, school dropout, substance abuse. I mean, you name it, and it's linked to fatherlessness in the home. So when you get down to the root, there's always roots that need to be pulled up, but we're too busy trimming the weeds, like on the top, and just we're never really getting to the root cause of things. But that would link us to a
Very
whole
true.
nother conversation. So um I wanna ask one more question as we begin to wrap up this podcast. And I think you guys, we've gotten some really uncomfortable places, and you guys have been so great to share and be open and honest. So I thank you.
I've loved this so far. I mean, it's great.
Awesome. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. I
very
appreciate it.
interesting.
So I guess my final question is, what are some judgments that people have made about you based on either how you vote or the values that you hold? And what would you like people to actually know about you in light of maybe some of those judgments you've received?
Wow. Judgments. I think for me, um, some of my conservative coworkers have judged me to be far too liberal. Um, in fact, most of my peers think that I'm far too open, far too liberal, and um, that I don't really take a hard line on things. And I guess that's fair. I don't generally take a hard line on things. Um, so yeah, I guess it's disappointing to me that they don't see the value in being able to come at a situation from more than one angle. But I'm certainly not um, I'm not regretful that that's the way I am.
I really, um, I really enjoy the way you are, Dave. I'll just say that there's a very mild manner, demeanor that's, very warm. And I've experienced you in this podcast as very moderate and balanced. And yes, you may lean more on the liberal side of things, but the way you talk, I sense a grace in that. So um, forget what your friends
Thank
say.
you. Thank you.
That's the moral of the story. How about you,
Thank
Alan?
you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah. So my experience with David, this podcast, just meeting him, I would not consider him a liberal at all. I mean, I very mild mannered, very middle of the road, guy. So it just what P said. Don't forget what your friend said. I do think not taking a stand or being hard lined, as you put it, on a subject can be a good thing. To have an open mind, to take input from all different directions, and mold that through your worldview filter, and how you perceive that and how you project that to the world can be a good thing, rather than having a blind loyalty to one particular line of thinking or another one. So I think that's very admirable, an admirable quality, that you don't follow. You're not a sheep or a lemming. Just following blindly. Um, so I think that's a very very good thing. As uh, as people have judged me, I've had so many people. Not that it upsets me, but it just bewilders me that people are this petty. That stop talking to me or unfriend me on Facebook or MySpace or whatever the platform was at the time, because of my views, because of what I've said, because of things that I've posted that I disagree with or agree with. Um, I have been called a racist. I have been called, Nazi supporter. Um, Gosh, all the other things that I've been called, just because of my views. And I think one aspect that I would encourage people to do is stop being what I would call a keyboard warrior, which is a person that is, firing off, posts and opinions behind a keyboard, in front of the screen, and actually get out and talk to people. And I think that's one of the things that you're doing, piece with this podcast, that people need to do more of. They need to engage in conversation, with one another. They need to exchange ideas, and they need to see, uh, that the other person isn't quite the enemy that they think they are, and that we're far more close to one another than the media would have us believe. And I think if more people did that, there would be less polarization, in this country, because you have these, big media conglomerates that are profiting on division, profiting on the division of ideas, and making enemies of liberals, conservatives, and that sort of thing. And I think that's wrong. And I think having an open conversation with someone, can lead to a lot more insight that you gather from that person, and you can say, hey, I actually agree with what you say, or some of what you say, and it's always good to, as David said he does, gather ideas from people, bring that back into your world, um and not be stuck in your own chamber of solitude, firing off angry posts on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I always say it feels like these days we don't need to talk to each other to decide what we think about each other. We could just watch the news. And that's I think what most people do these days. So I really hope we can find a way back from that. And things like this podcast are a start.
Yeah, I do think it's important to not, get your news and your opinions all from one source. You need to talk to people physically. You need to got on different newspapers, news sites, and both liberal, both conservative, both out of the United States, to form a good opinion. Like Dave said earlier, that he's got an insight that I don't have, that he's gathered from across the world. So I think that's really important to form a more rounded opinion of things and to be able to speak to that. So
yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well, gentlemen, this has been a real pleasure. I appreciate your honesty, your tone, and your willingness to show up for this kind of conversation. We definitely need more of this.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Peace. This format has been really good, and I've really enjoyed meeting Dave, and yeah, definitely.
Pleasure to meet you as
Excellent.
well.
Yeah, pleasure. Absolutely.
So for
And Peace,
all,
I just wanted to give you a plug. I signed up right away because I've been watching your Set the Table posts on Facebook with a lot of curiosity. So I just wanted you to know I really like what you're doing. And if I ever get out to your area, I hope to come by in person at some point.
thank you so much. That means a lot. I'm really excited about this work. I feel the momentum behind it. I feel the hopeful energy, and I really think this is the way forward.
Great. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. So for all our listeners, thank you for coming back again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to let you know that our Conflict to Connection workshop, our next one, is coming up at the end of next month on June 21st. Please tell a friend. I'm telling you, these workshops are really transformational. And I've seen the change in the individuals that come and go. And if you're experiencing negative polarization in your relationships, in your sphere, and you just want tools to navigate these things better, come on out. They're fun, they're interactive. You'll meet some people, they're immersive. And I think you'll have a really good time. So you can find out more information on setthetable.org/conflict to connection. And of course, find us on Facebook, on Instagram. You know all the handles, Set the Table Official. Same for YouTube. And on X, Set the Table HQ. And with that said, I am signing off. And as always, let's keep setting the table for a healthier, more whole society. I'll see you next time.